The signal and the response. The night shift at Sentinel Station was typically uneventful. Commander Ilara Rhodes preferred it that way. The orbital listening post hung in Earth's outer atmosphere like a technological spider, its sensors spreading invisible webs across the cosmos, detecting the faintest whispers from distant stars. Rhodes stared at the holographic display, the blue light casting shadows across her weathered face. 20 years in Earth's interstellar defense force had left her with permanent creases around her eyes and a perpetual wariness that her subordinates often mistook for coldness. She wasn't cold, just careful. Careful had kept her alive through the Proxima conflict and the Titan insurgency. "Commander, you should see this." Lieutenant Ferris's voice broke through the quiet hum of the station. The young officer's face was illuminated by his console, his eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Rhodes crossed the circular command center with practiced efficiency. "What is it, Lieutenant?" "A signal, ma'am. From the Epsilon Eridani system. It's structured, deliberate." Rhodes leaned over his shoulder, examining the waveform patterns crawling across his screen. Her breath caught. This wasn't random stellar noise or the echo of a dying star. This was communication, alien communication. "How long has it been transmitting?" she asked, keeping her voice level despite the adrenaline now coursing through her veins. "Just detected it now, ma'am. But according to the timestamp, it's been broadcasting for 3 months. It took that long to reach us." Rhodes straightened. "Isolate it. Run it through the translation matrix." Within minutes, the command center was filled with a strange, haunting voice, synthesized by the computer, but carrying the unmistakable cadence of desperation. "Please, help us. Our world is dying. The darkness comes. We cannot hold it back any longer. Please, if you receive this, send aid. We beg you." The message repeated, interspersed with mathematical sequences that Rhodes recognized as stellar coordinates. The voice was neither male nor female, but the fear in it transcended species and gender. It was primal, universal. "Contact Earth Command," Rhodes ordered. "Priority Alpha." Within hours, the highest levels of Earth's government and military were locked in heated debate. The holographic feeds showed 30 faces, generals, admirals, politicians, and scientists, all speaking over each other in the virtual council chamber. "It could be a trap," General Kezan argued, his bushy eyebrows furrowed. "The Proxima conflict taught us that not everything beyond our solar system is friendly. Or it could be exactly what it appears to be," countered Dr. Amara Sen, the leading xenobiologist. "A civilization in distress, reaching out for help. Do we really want to be the species that ignored a cry for help?" Rhodes watched the debate silently from her position at the edge of the holographic circle. She had been invited to observe, not to participate, but something about the signal nagged at her. The desperation seemed genuine, but there was a precision to it, a calculated quality that raised the hairs on the back of her neck. Secretary of Defense Helena Chen finally raised her hand, silencing the chamber. "We've heard all arguments. Now we must decide. We cannot ignore this signal. The political and moral implications would be disastrous if it became known we left an intelligent species to die. However, we cannot be naive." She turned to face the military contingent. "Prepare the 7th Fleet, not as a rescue mission, but as a show of force. If this is genuine, we'll help. If it's a trap, we'll be ready." Rhodes felt her stomach tighten. The 7th Fleet wasn't a humanitarian convoy. It was Earth's newest and most formidable battle group. 30 ships, including the colossal dreadnought Inevitability, armed with enough firepower to glass a small moon. The meeting adjourned, but Rhodes remained connected. "Madam Secretary, if I may." Chen's hologram turned toward her. "Commander Rhodes, you have thoughts." "The signal, something about it doesn't feel right. It's too," she struggled to find the words, "too perfect, like it was designed specifically to provoke our sympathy." Chen studied her for a moment. "Your concerns are noted, Commander, but the decision stands." She hesitated, then added, "However, given your experience with extraterrestrial communication, I'm assigning you to the mission. You'll serve as Strategic Communications Officer aboard the Inevitability." Rhodes nodded, accepting the assignment even as dread settled in her chest. The Inevitability lived up to its name, a 4-kilometer behemoth of carbon-titanium alloy and advanced weaponry, the culmination of humanity's military evolution since the First Contact War. Rhodes stood at the viewport of her quarters, watching as Earth grew smaller behind them. The rest of the 7th Fleet surrounded the flagship like a school of predatory fish. Admiral Victor Hassan, commander of the 7th Fleet, had called an officers' briefing in the Strategic Command Center. Rhodes entered the wood-paneled room, a touch of old naval tradition in the ultramodern vessel, to find 24 senior officers already seated around the oval table. "Commander Rhodes," Hassan acknowledged her with a nod. The admiral was a compact man with close-cropped silver hair and eyes that seemed to evaluate everything in terms of tactical advantage. "You're familiar with the signal that prompted this mission. What can you tell us?" Rhodes activated the holographic display in the center of the table, showing the waveform patterns she had studied obsessively for the past week. "The message appears to be from a civilization in the Epsilon Eridani system, approximately 10.5 light-years from Earth. They claim their world is dying and request immediate assistance against something they refer to as the darkness." She manipulated the display, highlighting specific sections of the waveform. However, there are anomalies. The signal contains embedded data packets that don't align with the verbal message. These packets include what appear to be tactical information, orbital paths, defensive capabilities, even what might be weapons specifications. A murmur ran through the assembled officers. Admiral Hassan leaned forward. "Are you suggesting they're trying to lure us in?" "I'm suggesting that whoever sent this signal wants us to come prepared for war, not rescue." Rhodes paused. "The question is, why?" Lieutenant Commander James Park, the fleet's intelligence officer, spoke up. "Maybe they're fighting a war they can't win. Maybe they need allies with better weapons. Or maybe," said Captain Laurel Martinez, commander of the destroyer Swift Justice, "they want to see what our weapons can do before they decide whether to attack us." Hassan silenced the speculation with a raised hand. "Regardless of their motives, our orders are clear. We approach with caution, weapons hot, shields at maximum. We help if we can, but the safety of this fleet and Earth remains our priority." He fixed Rhodes with a stern gaze. "Commander, I want you monitoring all communications. Any new transmissions, any changes to the signal pattern. I want to know immediately." Rhodes nodded. "Yes, Admiral." As the briefing concluded, Rhodes lingered, studying the holographic representation of their destination, Epsilon Eridani, a younger star than Sol, with a complex planetary system that humanity had observed but never visited. What awaited them there? Desperate allies, a cunning enemy, or something else entirely? The question haunted her as the 7th Fleet engaged its FTL drives, accelerating to velocities that compressed space around them, hurling them toward a destination that grew more ominous with each passing day. 3 weeks into the journey, the signal changed. Rhodes was in the communications center when it happened, reviewing the latest deep space scans with her team. The transformation was sudden. The plaintive voice abruptly cut off, replaced by a burst of data so dense it temporarily overloaded the ship's receivers. When they restored the systems, a new message played. "They are awakening. The containment is failing. Do not approach. Repeat, do not approach. If you have launched vessels, recall them. If you cannot recall them, arm them." The darkness stirs. The voice was the same, but the tone had shifted from desperation to stark terror. Rhodes immediately relayed the new transmission to Admiral Hassan, who called an emergency council of war. "This changes everything," Hassan said, his face grim as he addressed his senior officers. "We're no longer responding to a plea for help. We're potentially heading into an active conflict zone. Or it's the next phase of their trap, Captain Martinez suggested. Make us think we're heading into danger, so we come in firing. A self-fulfilling prophecy. Rhodes shook her head. The data embedded in this new transmission is different, more chaotic, like it was sent in haste. She displayed the analysis on the main screen. There are fragments of what look like containment protocols, references to something called the Elder Dark, and warning symbols that translate across multiple known linguistic systems. Hassan studied the data, his expression darkening. We're 2 days out from the Epsilon Eridani system. Too late to turn back now. He looked around the table. Maintain course. But I want all ships at battle stations before we exit FTL. Whatever's waiting for us, we'll be ready. As the officers filed out, Hassan motioned for Rhodes to remain. When they were alone, he asked, "What aren't you saying, Commander?" Rhodes hesitated, then admitted, "The new data contains genetic sequences, Admiral, complex ones, along with what appear to be quarantine procedures. You think this is about a biological threat? I think," Rhodes said carefully, "that whatever they're containing might not be just an enemy. It might be something else, something worse." The 7th Fleet dropped out of FTL at the edge of the Epsilon Eridani system, sensors immediately scanning for threats. What they found left even the most seasoned officers speechless. The third planet, the source of the signal, was surrounded by a massive orbital structure, a ring of interconnected stations and defense platforms that encircled the entire world like a metal halo. But parts of the ring were dark, damaged. As they watched, a section detached and drifted into space, trailing debris. "Life signs," Admiral Hassan demanded. "Minimal, sir," reported the sensor officer. "The remaining stations show approximately 5,000 individuals. The planet itself," she hesitated. "Sir, the planet is quarantined. Some kind of energy shield surrounds it, but it's failing in multiple sectors." Rhodes stared at the tactical display, her mind racing. This wasn't a civilization asking for rescue from a natural disaster. This was a containment system, a prison. Before she could voice her realization, a transmission cut through the silence of the bridge. "Earth vessels, you should not have come, but now that you are here, you must help us maintain the seal. The darkness cannot be allowed to escape. It has slept for millennia, but our failures have awakened it. If it breaks free, your world will be next." The message was accompanied by a visual transmission, the first glimpse of the beings who had sent the distress signal. They were tall, slender creatures with luminescent skin and multiple arms that moved with unsettling grace. Their eyes, 4 on each elongated head, blinked independently of one another. "We are the Guardians," the alien continued, "appointed by the Galactic Conclave 10,000 of your years ago to ensure the Elder Dark remained imprisoned. We have failed in our duty. Our numbers dwindle. Our technology falters. The seal weakens." Admiral Hassan stepped forward. "This is Admiral Victor Hassan of the Earth 7th Fleet. We received your distress call and came to render assistance. Explain the nature of this darkness you're containing." The alien's eyes blinked in an unsettling pattern. "Not containing. Imprisoning. The Elder Dark is not a force. It is a being. Ancient. Malevolent. It fed on entire civilizations before the United Species of the galaxy managed to trap it here. We were chosen to stand guard." Hassan exchanged a glance with Rhodes. "And now you're asking us to take your place." "No," the alien replied, its voice suddenly firm. "We are asking you to help us destroy this world before the prison fails completely. The Elder Dark must not escape." A stunned silence fell over the bridge. Rhodes stepped forward. "You want us to destroy an entire planet. There must be another." She never finished her sentence. At that moment, the planetary shield flickered, then failed entirely in one hemisphere. From the surface below, something enormous rose into the atmosphere, a writhing mass of darkness that seemed to absorb light itself, trailing tendrils that reached toward the stars. Alarms blared across the fleet as sensors registered a power surge unlike anything they had ever encountered. The darkness expanded, growing larger as it ascended toward the orbital ring. "All ships, battle formations," Hassan ordered. "Target that thing, whatever it is." But Rhodes knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that they weren't facing an enemy their weapons could defeat. They had answered a call for help, only to find themselves on the front lines of a war that had been raging since before humanity learned to make fire. Earth had sent an invasion fleet, but they weren't the invaders. They were the last line of defense, the true enemy. The darkness rose from the planet's surface like a living storm, massive tendrils of void-black energy reaching toward the orbital defense ring, where the last of the alien guardians fought desperately to maintain what remained of the containment field. The Seventh Fleet hung in space, weapons trained on the phenomenon, but holding fire. Conventional tactics seeming suddenly inadequate against such an incomprehensible threat. "What the hell is that thing?" Admiral Hassan's voice cut through the shocked silence on the Inevitabilities bridge. The Guardian commander's voice crackled over the comms. "That is the Elder Dark, or a small manifestation of it. Its true form exists partly in dimensions your species cannot perceive." Rhodes studied the tactical displays as the entity continued to expand. It didn't move like a living creature, nor did it behave like any natural phenomenon she had ever encountered. It seemed to flow through space, simultaneously liquid and gas, and something else entirely. "We need more information," she said, turning to Admiral Hassan. "Sir, request permission to establish direct communication with the Guardian command station. We need to understand exactly what we're facing and what weapons might be effective." Hassan nodded grimly. "Granted, and have all ships pull back to minimum safe distance. I don't want anyone engaging until we know what we're dealing with." As the fleet executed a tactical retreat, Rhodes established a secure channel to the largest remaining section of the orbital ring. The Guardian who appeared on the screen looked haggard, its luminescent skin dimmed with exhaustion. "I am Sentinel Kirvilax," it said without preamble. "Ninth-generation Guardian of the Seal. You have questions. Ask quickly." "What is the Elder Dark?" "Truly?" Rhodes demanded. "Not metaphors or legends. Scientific facts." Kirvilax's 4 eyes blinked in that disconcerting pattern again. "It is a composite entity, a hive mind of consumed consciousnesses controlled by a central intelligence of immense age and power. It exists simultaneously as energy and matter, capable of converting one to the other. It feeds on sentient life, not just the physical form, but the consciousness itself." How was it imprisoned? The combined technological might of 17 advanced civilizations created the seal, a dimensional barrier anchored to this planet's core. The Elder Dark cannot be destroyed by conventional means, only contained. Rhodes processed this. Then what good would destroying the planet do? It would reset the seal temporarily, a fail-safe mechanism built into the prison. The explosion would force the Elder Dark back into dimensional stasis for perhaps another millennium before it could gather strength again. Hassan, who had been listening to the exchange, stepped into view of the communication array. "And how exactly were you planning for us to destroy an entire planet? Even our most powerful antimatter weapons couldn't accomplish that." Kirvilax's expression was impossible to read. "Your fleet carries weapons we do not possess. Different technologies, different approaches. Combined with our remaining defensive capabilities, it might be enough to trigger a chain reaction in the planet's core." "Might," Rhodes repeated flatly. "There are no certainties when facing the Elder Dark," Kirvilax responded. "Only desperate measures and the hope of survival." As if to punctuate this statement, a massive tendril of darkness lashed out, striking one of the fleet's scout ships. The vessel didn't explode. It simply went dark, all systems failing simultaneously. Then, to the horror of those watching, the ship began to crumble, its hull deteriorating into dust that was absorbed into the growing mass of the entity. "All hands," Hassan ordered, his voice tight with controlled fear. Fire at will. Target the main mass. The combined firepower of Earth's most formidable battle fleet erupted toward the Elder Dark. Particle beams, antimatter missiles, graviton pulses, and more esoteric weapons developed after the Proxima conflict. The barrage struck the entity directly, enormous explosions blossoming across its surface. For a moment, it seemed to recoil, contracting slightly. Then it surged forward again, apparently unarmed. Conventional weapons are ineffective, Relentless stated. The Elder Dark absorbs energy and matter alike. Your attacks only feed it. Rhodes felt cold dread settling in the pit of her stomach. Then what can hurt it? The seal weapons. Relentless gestured to points along the orbital ring where massive ancient devices pulsed with a strange blue-white energy. They disrupt the Elder Dark's ability to maintain cohesion across dimensions. But most have failed, and the remaining ones cannot generate enough power. Asen turned to his tactical officer. Analysis of those weapons. Unknown technology, sir, operating on principles we don't understand. But they're generating a unique subspace field that seems to be keeping the entity partially contained. Rhodes studied the weapons, an idea forming. Admiral, the Inevitability's main reactor operates on principles similar to what I'm seeing there, controlled quantum fluctuation. If we could adapt our power systems to augment theirs, Hassan understood immediately. We'd be sacrificing our flagship. Yes, sir. But it might generate enough energy to trigger that failsafe. The bridge fell silent as Hassan weighed the options. Finally, he nodded. Make it happen, Commander. I'll begin evacuation procedures for non-essential personnel. The next 12 hours were a desperate race against time. While the rest of the fleet engaged in hit-and-run tactics to distract the Elder Dark, Rhodes worked with the ship's engineering team and a group of Guardian technicians who had transported aboard. Together, they modified the Inevitability's main reactor to interface with the ancient seal weapons. The plan was simple in concept but nightmarishly complex in execution. Position the Inevitability at the center of the remaining orbital weapons, link their systems, then overload the reactor in a controlled detonation that would channel its energy through the seal network and into the planet's core. As the final preparations were made, Rhodes found herself in the auxiliary control room with Relentless, who was helping calibrate the interface between human and Guardian technology. Your species surprised us, the Guardian said unexpectedly, its 4 eyes focused on the work. How so? We sent that signal to 17 systems. Yours was the only one that responded. Relentless's hands moved with fluid precision across the control panel. The others either ignored our plea or sent messages declining involvement. Rhodes paused. Yet you seem unsurprised that we came with a battle fleet rather than aid ships. Relentless made a sound that might have been laughter. The distress signal was designed to provoke exactly that response. Had we openly stated we were failing in our duty to contain an ancient cosmic horror, would your leaders have sent your most powerful weapons? You manipulated us. We called for help in a manner most likely to receive it. The Guardian's tone was matter of fact. And now you stand with us against the end of all things. Judge us if you wish, but do so after we have succeeded, if we succeed. Before Rhodes could respond, Admiral Hassan's voice came over the comm. Enemy activity increasing. All personnel to evacuation stations. Commander Rhodes, status. Final calibrations complete, Admiral. The system is ready. Understood. The last evacuation shuttles depart in 20 minutes. Make sure you're on one of them. Rhodes acknowledged the order. Though a part of her had already accepted she might not leave the Inevitability alive. Someone would need to remain aboard to ensure the reactor overload sequence executed properly. As if reading her thoughts, Relentless said, "You plan to stay." It wasn't a question. Someone has to make sure this works. Too much could go wrong with remote activation. The Guardian studied her for a long moment. You would sacrifice yourself for a world not your own, against a threat you only learned of days ago. Rhodes met its gaze steadily. I would sacrifice myself to protect Earth. If this thing escapes, my world is next. That's what you said. Yes, it would be drawn to your planet's concentration of sentient life. Kirivalax hesitated, then added, I too will remain. It is fitting that a guardian oversees the final act of our vigilance. Admiral Hassan argued vehemently against Rhodes's decision to stay aboard, but ultimately relented when she pointed out the technical necessities. As the last evacuation shuttles departed, only Rhodes, Kirivalax, and a skeleton crew of volunteers remained on the massive flagship. From the bridge, they watched as the Elder Dark continued to expand, now engulfing nearly a quarter of the planet's upper atmosphere. The remaining Guardian stations were failing one by one, their ancient technology no match for the awakened entity's power. Begin maneuvering thrusters, Rhodes ordered. Position us at the calculated focal point. The inevitability moved ponderously into position, its massive bulk now aligned with the remaining SEAL weapons. Power conduits snaked from the ship to the ancient devices, forming a complex web of energy that hummed with potential. All stations, final status report, Rhodes called. One by one, the remaining crew confirmed their readiness. The reactor was primed for overload, the energy shunts were aligned, and the targeting systems were locked on the planet's core. Kirivalax, your systems. The Guardians' hands danced across the alien console they had installed on the bridge. The remaining SEAL weapons acknowledged the connection. They await your vessel's power surge. Rhodes took a deep breath. This was it. No turning back now. She opened a channel to the rest of the fleet, now positioned at a safe distance. Admiral Hassan, we're in position and ready to execute. Hassan's voice was solemn. Understood, Commander. The fleet stands ready to retrieve survivors and continue containment operations if your plan succeeds. If not, he paused. It has been an honor serving with you. Likewise, Admiral. Rhodes out. She turned to her remaining crew. It's been an honor. If anyone wishes to leave, the last shuttle is still docked. No judgment. No one moved. With a nod of acknowledgement, Rhodes activated the final sequence, initiating reactor overload in 3, 2, 1. The ship shuddered as its quantum reactor began to destabilize, pouring energy into the SEAL weapons. The ancient devices glowed brighter and brighter, their blue-white radiance eventually becoming too intense to look at directly. On the view screen, they watched as beams of concentrated energy lanced from the weapons down to the planet's surface, cutting through the darkness like knives through cloth. The Elder Dark recoiled, its massive form contracting as if in pain. It's working, someone shouted. But their celebration was premature. A massive tendril of darkness rose up, striking directly at the inevitability. The ship shook violently, systems failing across the board. Reactor containment failing. The engineering officer reported. We're losing control of the overload sequence. Rhodes fought to stay upright as the ship continued to shake. Kirivalax, what's happening? The Guardian was working frantically at its console. The Elder Dark senses what we're attempting. It's trying to disrupt the energy flow. Can we compensate? Not automatically. Someone must manually realign the energy shunts from the primary distribution node. Kirivalax looked up, its 4 eyes blinking in that strange pattern. I cannot do it. My physiology cannot withstand the radiation levels. Rhodes understood immediately. Where? Lower engineering deck. Section 42. Without hesitation, Rhodes headed for the door. Maintain what control you can. I'll realign the shunts. The journey to Section 42 was a nightmare of collapsing corridors and fluctuating gravity. Twice Rhodes had to take detours around sections exposed to vacuum. When she finally reached the distribution node, the radiation warning klaxons were blaring, and the air itself seemed to shimmer with lethal energy. The shunt controls were designed to be adjusted by robotic arms, not human hands, but those systems had failed, leaving only manual override as an option. Rhodes knew that opening the access panel would expose her to fatal levels of radiation. But if she didn't, billions would die when the Elder Dark eventually reached Earth. With steady hands, she opened the panel and reached inside, feeling the skin on her arms blister almost immediately. Gritting her teeth against the pain, she found the alignment controls and began the delicate process of redirecting the energy flow. Through tearing eyes, she watched the indicator lights shift from red to amber, then finally to green. The energy flow stabilized, routing properly to the seal weapons once more. Rhodes staggered back from the panel, her vision already beginning to blur from radiation exposure. She knew she wouldn't make it back to the bridge, so she slumped against the wall and opened her comlink. Relentless. Shunts realigned. Status. The Guardian's voice seemed to come from very far away. Energy flow restored. The seal weapons are at full power. The planetary core is responding. Commander Rhodes, what you have done will be remembered. Rhodes wanted to respond, but found she lacked the strength. Instead, she watched through a viewport as the seal weapons fired once more into the heart of the Elder Dark. This time, the entity couldn't defend itself. The energy beams pierced through its mass, driving deep into the planet below. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the planet's crust began to crack, massive fissures spreading across its surface. Light, blindingly intense, erupted from these cracks, engulfing the Elder Dark. The entity writhed, its form beginning to disintegrate under the onslaught. As consciousness faded, Rhodes saw the planet itself begin to collapse, imploding rather than exploding, as if being drawn into some unseen singularity. The Elder Dark was being pulled back into its prison, forced once more into dimensional stasis by the ancient failsafe. Her last thought was a simple one. We did it. 3 months later, a memorial service was held aboard the Swift Justice, now the flagship of what remained of the Seventh Fleet. Admiral Hassan stood before the assembled officers, his face solemn as he addressed them. Today we honor the crew of the Inevitability, who gave their lives not only for Earth but for countless worlds across the galaxy. Their sacrifice ensured that the entity known as the Elder Dark remains imprisoned for another 1,000 years. He paused, his gaze sweeping across the assembly. We also recognize the beginning of a new chapter in humanity's place in the cosmos. The Guardians, weakened but not defeated, have offered to share their knowledge with us, not just of the threat we face together, but of the wider galactic community we now join as equals. On the view screen behind him, images appeared of the new joint human Guardian outpost being constructed near where Epsilon Eridani II had once orbited. The planet was gone, collapsed into a dimensional anomaly that now served as the Elder Dark's reinforced prison. In its place, a permanent watch station was being built, a cooperative effort between the species that would ensure the ancient horror remained contained. Commander Ilara Rhodes once told me that she sensed something wrong with the original distress signal, Hassan continued. She was right, but not in the way any of us expected. The Guardians didn't call for help against an external threat. They called for help because they knew their mission was too important to fail, even if their civilization was ending. He gestured to a Guardian representative who stood nearby, not Kirvilax, who had also perished aboard the Inevitability, but another of their kind who had come to formalize the alliance. They asked for help, and humanity answered, not with the rescue they pretended to want, but with the invasion fleet that they truly needed. Our weapons, our technology, our willingness to fight. These were the true aid they sought. Hassan's voice grew firmer. And so, as we remember our fallen comrades, we also accept a new responsibility. Earth is now a guardian world. Our fleets will not just defend our planet, but stand watch against threats that transcend normal understanding. We sent an invasion fleet to answer a plea for help, and in doing so, found our place among the stars. The assembly rose in silent tribute, not just to those who had been lost, but to the new path that lay before them. Earth had been drawn into an ancient conflict without knowing it, and had emerged not as conquerors or saviors, but as inheritors of a sacred duty. The Elder Dark slept once more, and humanity stood watch, ready for the day it might stir again. Because the next time a distant world begged for help, Earth would know exactly what fleet to send.